Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today's video will be my May and June reading wrap up. I read a total of 10 books in the last 2 months. I read 6 in May, 4 in June. All 10 of them were physical books. I did also alternate between 2 audiobooks and reading the physical book at the same time, which is a first for me. I haven't ever really listened to an audiobook. I maybe listened to a little bit of one before, but I haven't listened to a full audiobook where I was listening to at least 50% of it on audiobook. So that was really fun, and I definitely understand why people enjoy audiobooks now. I also had one DNF, which I will talk about. Then I'm also going to talk about my TBR jar towards the end of this video. In case you haven't seen my bookish stuff video, I did kind of change some stuff regarding my TBR jar. So let's get into the wrap up. I'm obviously going to start with my May books. The first 3 books I read in May, I vlogged. I had a whole vlog dedicated to all 3 of these books. So if you want to know a lot of details about them, I will leave that vlog down below. The first one I read was Butcher and Blackbird by Brynne Weaver. This I gave 4 out of 5 stars. This follows 2 serial killers, Sloane and Rowan, who meet by chance and decide to create a friendly game of catching other serial killers to see who can kill them first. The more they run into each other while competing, the more they realize how similar they are to each other and how there might be more to their friendly game. If I'm looking down, it's because I'm looking at my reading journal. I just feel like it's easier to read off the summary that I wrote and look at my review. This was really fun. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was very exciting and thrilling and interesting. I love how Rowan was head over heels in love with Sloane. The day he met her, he was just so intrigued and fascinated by her, and I loved how he basically created the game to spend time with her. And I like how he waited for her. He waited until she was ready for a relationship, and I did like Sloane's development. I do wish we kind of got a little bit more of her past and her childhood. I did like the plot twist at the end. I personally did not see it coming. I don't know if I was just blind, but I didn't see the ending coming. Overall, I just really enjoyed it, and I'm definitely going to continue the series. Then I read Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez, which I gave a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Jacob and Brianna have a rough first impression when Jacob starts working at the hospital, but after he writes her a letter to explain himself, they form a quick friendship that leads into a fake dating scenario. There's a lot more that goes on in this book, but it deals heavily with mental health, and I felt like the rep was very realistic and it felt very authentic and real. I really liked both characters. I liked their romance. I like how they formed a friendship first and then it kind of grew into something more. There was some miscommunication towards the end, which I personally did not enjoy. And even though I liked this book and it did make me feel emotional and I did cry a little bit, I still found it to be a little forgettable. I don't feel like I fully remember even what happened. And maybe that's just because there is a lot that goes on in this book, and maybe that was kind of overwhelming for the story. I don't really know, but I did really like this book. It was a heartwarming, beautiful, emotional story, but unfortunately, it just didn't fully stick with me. Then for that same vlog, I also read Love Redesigned by Lauren Asher. This is the first book in the Lakefront Billionaires series, and this I gave 2.5 out of 5 stars. Julian and Dahlia, family friends and childhood rivals, reunite in their small town to work on renovating a historic house to make a profit, but while spending all this time together, finally make them face their feelings for each other. I'm pretty sure this is my last try with Lauren Asher. I do want to possibly try to finish the Dirty Air series. I think I have the last book to read, or maybe the last 2. I don't fully remember, but I do want to try to maybe finish that series. But going forward, I don't think I'm going to read any of Lauren Asher's newer books. I just find them incredibly boring and long. I've also realized that I don't enjoy romance books that feature renovating, house reno, reality TV show, that kind of thing. I'm not into that when it comes to romance novels, so I think I'm just going to avoid that for the future. But I personally just didn't really care about the characters or the romance. I didn't feel their connection. This book also was just way too long. It did not need to be this long. It could have been cut by 100 pages. Dahlia talks a lot about her mental health and how she's doing, and I felt like that was very realistic, and I liked that aspect. It kind of gave it more of a deeper feel or meaning to the story. I mean, I cared about Julian and there was a scene where he's talking about his dad who has passed and he is getting kind of emotional about it. That kind of hit me, but other than that, I just found this book to be very, very forgettable. Then I read Chain of Iron by Cassandra Clare. This is the second book in the Last Hours trilogy, and this I gave 3.5 out of 5 stars. Obviously, this is the second book in the series, and it kind of picks up after the first one. There's kind of a cliffhanger in the first one, so you're kind of right back in the story, but essentially this one follows a mysterious killer who is targeting shadow hunters, then vanishing without a trace. Cordelia, James, Lucy, and the Merry Thieves are determined to find the killer. I would say I listened to probably 60% of the audiobook, and then I read 40% of it on my own. This was the first time that I listened to an audiobook while also reading well, I didn't do it at the same time, but I would read a couple chapters myself, then I would listen to the audiobook when I was like cleaning, or there were some times where I felt like too lazy to read it, so I would just listen to it. Like I would just sit on my bed and listen to it. And honestly, it was a lot of fun. I'm really, really happy that I started to listen to an audiobook, especially for a book like this big. And there's a lot of things that are repetitive. It just honestly helped me finish the book a lot sooner. Honestly, I'm not super in love with these characters and this series. I would say it's probably one of my least favorites in the entire Shadowhunter collection chronicles. I really did not expect to see where this story went. I do think in general the plot was a little bit different than the other Shadowhunter books, but also it felt so similar in a way. Like it had a different plot, but I think the characters just sometimes felt a little too similar to other characters that Cassandra Clare has already created. I of course really cared about like the old characters like Will, Jem, Tessa, Magnus, the Lightwoods, kind of the, you know, classic characters. I really cared about them. So it was nice to see them, and they kind of got a pretty heavy storyline in these books, which I enjoyed. I do feel like the plot was getting better in this one compared to the first book, so I was intrigued to keep reading and read the last book. In a way, I also felt like there was so many characters, and it just felt like hard to care about all of them. And there were a lot of like love triangles happening, and I just didn't really know how I should feel, like who I should want together and stuff like that. So I don't know. I enjoyed it, and obviously I did read the last book, but unfortunately I don't think like the first and the second book stand out to me at all. And then I read The Graham Effect by Elle Kennedy, which I gave a 3 out of 5 stars. Gigi Graham needs to improve her game behind the net, and who better to help her than Luke Ryder, Briar's new hockey co-captain and someone she very much does not like but is super attracted to. This is a hockey college romance. This is also the first book in the Campus Diaries series, and this is technically, I guess, a spinoff of the Off-Campus series. This first book is about Garrett and Hannah's daughter, Gigi. I initially was not going to pick this up just because I haven't really enjoyed Elle Kennedy's newer books. I enjoyed a lot of her older stuff, but her newest stuff is just not really for me. But I heard really good things about the newer book in the series, The Dixon Rule, and I had heard decent things about this one, so I thought I would give it a try. Obviously, I gave it 3 stars. I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it. This book was fun. It did feel a little nostalgic. It was very easy to read, but the first like 160 pages were kind of boring. I feel like I really got more invested in the story once Ryder and Gigi were hooking up. There were a lot of characters in here, and one thing about hockey romances is sometimes they're confusing when you have multiple players who have like their first and last name, and then they have like that nickname. It was a little confusing for me. I do feel like this book was a little long. It could have been 100 pages shorter, in my opinion. It drags a little bit towards the end. I feel like Ryder had a pretty good character development throughout this book. He really tried to be a better man, and I really appreciate how Gigi was very patient with him and very understanding. I, of course, loved the Graham family, and it was nice to kind of see them in here a little bit and see Hannah and Garrett and their relationship as parents. The ending kind of came out of nowhere for me. I personally didn't really enjoy that. It would have been nice to kind of see that instead of just like hearing about it or like it being mentioned. I obviously don't want to spoil what that is. It's nothing bad. It's a good thing, but it just kind of like threw me off a little bit, and I would have loved to see that happen. Overall, it was just like a very mediocre, fine college hockey romance. I enjoyed it. I will be reading the second book. Then my last read for May was Chain of Thorns by Cassandra Clare. This is the third and final book in the Last Hours trilogy, and this I gave 4 out of 5 stars. This one I also listened to the audiobook. I probably listened to maybe more like 80% of it on audiobook. It's a massive book and it took me forever to read. I was basically trying to read like 2 to 3 chapters a day just to kind of like slowly get through it. And the audiobook definitely helped. I was able to read a lot while I was cleaning, while I was doing like a Sunday reset, when I was at work an hour early, I got to like listen to the audiobook. And I think going forward for like big fantasy books like this, I think I'm going to listen to audiobooks just because it helps a lot and I can do other things while also listening to a book and taking that in. I think my biggest issue I had before in the past is I thought I couldn't focus on like doing 2 things at once, but honestly I can. I totally retained everything from this book while listening to it and then also while reading it. This one again picks up straight after the second book. I guess I could kind of say what this is about, but James, Cordelia, Lucy, and the Merry Thieves must save London from a prince of hell. This one was very action-packed. It was very exciting. I cried a lot. Like I literally cried so much just because I could not believe what was happening, who died, everything. There was so much going on and it was very emotional. This is definitely my favorite in the series, but again, I don't fully love this series as much as the other Shadowhunter books. I loved Matthew's character development. I loved James's character development. Grace also had some amazing character development. Obviously, this book is very massive. There are parts that drag and there are some boring parts that I definitely feel like could have been edited out. But regardless, I really enjoyed this and I loved the ending. I loved everybody else's happy endings, but the ending specifically with Jem and that person, I don't want to spoil anything, obviously, that I really liked because that was just like so smart and like creative of Cassandra Clare. And after finishing this book, or actually while I was in the middle of this book, okay, I went to go look at my copy of Clockwork Princess to look at the family tree, okay? Because I was like, this cannot be happening to me. Like this, I don't believe this. So I looked at the family tree. It said some stuff and I was like, okay, so, you know, things are gonna change, right? I finished the book, nothing changed. I was very, very upset. And then I like Googled to see if like the family tree was fake, and turns out it is. Not everything on that family tree is accurate. Basically, I guess Cassandra Clare like said that the family tree is not 100% accurate because the family tree got lost throughout the years, yada, 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 you know, made up some excuse because I don't think that's true. I don't think Cassandra Clare planned out this series when she wrote that family tree, so she had to like improvise. Anyways, I was butthurt about that family tree. I was butthurt that it lied. But regardless, this was very entertaining and dramatic and emotional, and I'm very glad that I finally finished this entire trilogy and I can now move on and read her other series that I think comes out next year, I'm pretty sure. Or maybe it's 2026. I don't fully remember, but I know that she's taken kind of a big gap to finish the last series. I did have a DNF in May, but I'll talk about that at the end because it kind of relates to my TBR jar. But now into the 4 books that I read in June. So we have Crossroads by Devney Perry. This is the first book in the Haven River Ranch series, and this I gave 4 out of 5 stars. Realistically, I think it's more of a 3.5 out of 5, but we'll just round it up to 4. Wes and India slowly fall in love every summer as children when India's family stayed at Wes's family's ranch/resort. India and Wes haven't seen each other in years, but India is back at the ranch as the new owner. Working side by side is not easy, but will they give in to their past or finally say goodbye? I really enjoyed this. There was something about it that kept me wanting to read and wanting to find out what happened in their past. It is kind of alternating between the present and the past. You kind of see them from when they're children up until like their last interaction before the current present time. And that honestly is what kept me wanting to read, because I just wanted to see what happened in their past and like why they fell out and why they are kind of like estranged now. I liked how this was a ranch slash like resort, and I do really like how India tried to fix the ranch and like give it life again, and she really cared about the ranch, which I loved. And I loved seeing her kind of like slowly fix things and kind of take charge. I really enjoyed that aspect. I didn't really love West and India together. I didn't fully feel their connection. I think I felt it more when they were teenagers, but then like in their adulthood, I just like didn't really get it, I guess. I honestly kind of wish we would have saw them more as like teenagers together, like falling in love. I wanted more of that. Also, the reason why India wanted the ranch and like wanted to save it was wonderful, and I loved what she did for West. There is also a side plot of grief and a sick loved one, specifically with cancer, and I thought that that storyline was very well done and very beautiful, and it did make me emotional. Overall, I really enjoyed the story. I thought it was a short and sweet summer ranch romance. Then I read All My Kisses for You by Monica Murphy, which I gave 3 out of 5 stars. This is the first book in the Lancaster Prep Next Generation series. This is a spin-off of her Lancaster Prep series. Specifically, this one is a spin-off of A Million Kisses in Your Lifetime. This follows Willow, who is Crew and Wren's daughter. Willow Lancaster, shy, kind, and the perfect student, is back from a year of studying in Europe, and everything has changed. Everyone is obsessed with the new guy, Rhett Bennett, the star quarterback of the football team, and Willow quickly realizes she may be obsessed with him too, and maybe he can help her shed her good girl reputation. I enjoyed this. I thought it was really fun, but it did lack a lot of things for me. I personally didn't fully feel the connection between Willow and Rhett. I feel like their relationship was a little too slow for me. They really didn't kiss until like page 200. Like, it was very slow, very angsty, and I expected a little bit more fast-paced to their relationship because I read A Million Kisses in Your Lifetime, and I feel like a lot happens in that book quite early on. This one was just like way too slow for me, and I think it kind of took me out of the story. Like, I was just waiting for them to finally kiss. And this is definitely my fault, but I was expecting their relationship to be on the level of Wren and Crew's, and it just wasn't. I mean, like, Crew was obsessed with Wren, and she was all he could think about, and I just didn't feel that same way about this book, even though Rhett kept saying that he was like really into her and like obsessed. I just didn't feel it. Willow was pretty shy and innocent, but she was also kind of snobby, but pretty aware of it as well, which was nice. I honestly feel like Rhett didn't really have a personality. Like, he was just obsessed with football and Willow, and that was like it. I don't feel like there was much to him. I loved seeing glimpses of Willow's family and her parents, of course. I loved seeing Wren and Crew as parents. I honestly was kind of annoyed with Willow's cousin Iris. She was just a little too much for me, and I kind of was like annoyed with her and how much she was just always there. And the villain in here was definitely kind of weird. Like, I don't really understand the point of that person being the villain, I guess. I don't know. It was just a little strange for me. Like, I get it. It does make sense. But also at the same time, I just felt like it was a little too weird and just kind of came out of nowhere in a way. I think overall the romance was very cute and very sweet and very innocent, but it was just honestly very forgettable. I feel like I've been reading a lot of forgettable books, which is kind of sad. The last 2 books I read, I also vlogged, so I will link that video down below. It was my oldest and newest book on my physical TBR. So I read Abandon by Meg Cabot, which I gave 3 out of 5 stars. A near-death experience, a horrible incident at school, and a move from Connecticut to Florida have turned 17-year-old Pierce's life upside down. But when she needs him most, John Hayden is always there helping, but reminding her of her visit to the underworld. This is a YA paranormal, like urban fantasy. It is a Hades and Persephone retelling. I did really enjoy this. I thought it was very atmospheric. I loved the mystery element. I loved the like small town vibes. I liked Pierce. I thought she was a very interesting and unique character. It was a very fast-paced read, and it really got to the point. It didn't drag. You got to learn about all of the mysterious things quite early on, which I appreciate. The overall mystery of this entire book was just very interesting, and it kept me wanting to read. I didn't fully love John. I feel like he definitely lacked a little bit. I just feel like we didn't really get much of him, and I wanted to see more of a development between John and Pierce, but I feel like their relationship, I guess, didn't really have any depth to it. Obviously, this is the first book in the series, so that could later change in the next books. I unfortunately won't read them. I'm just not that interested to keep reading 2 other books. So the romance kind of lacked for me. I mean, there wasn't much of a romance storyline. I mean, it was there, but I personally didn't love that aspect of this book. I enjoyed more so all the other things. Even though I won't be continuing this series, I do think it is a great young adult urban fantasy. And then the last book I read in June was Ready or Not by Kara Bastone, which I gave 5 out of 5 stars. I read this in the same vlog as Abandoned, so again, that will be linked down below. I feel like this book is going to be really hard for me to explain, so we're just going to go very basic here. A surprise pregnancy leads to even more life-changing revelations in this heartfelt, slow burn, friends to lovers romance of found family and unexpected love. This is my first 5-star read of the entire year. I had some other 5-star reads, but they were rereads. This is my first 5-star read of the year, and I loved it so much. And it was really unexpected for me to love this that much, just because when I first started it, I was enjoying it. I feel like I didn't fully get into it. Maybe 110 pages in, and then I was like completely sold, and I was like, okay, I am loving this, and I couldn't help but give it 5 stars just because it made me feel very emotional. I was really loving the characters and just the way that the story was going. I just loved it so much. I really loved Eve. I thought she was a fantastic heroine, and I felt like I could really relate to her, and I could really understand a lot of her struggles, even though I am not pregnant, nor do I have a kid. But I could really understand like her thought process and her going through all of these life changes. I felt like it was very realistic. The romance plot wasn't really the main focus at the beginning of the story, and I feel like it grows throughout the book, which I love. I loved Shep. I thought he was just the perfect guy. He was just there for Eve any minute. I first wasn't sure how I felt about Ethan, but the more that this book progressed, the more I liked him. I really loved the deep conversations that Eve had with her friends, Willa, and she had some deep ones with Shep, and then Ethan, she also had a very deep conversation with. I love how we got glimpses of like other mothers helping her to like understand what it's going to be like to be a mom and all of the life changes that happen along the way. At the beginning, it's kind of hinted that like Eve doesn't really have a relationship with her brothers because they are a lot older than she is. And then she went home for Christmas, and you got to see like the dynamic between her brothers, and I really, really loved that. And I loved the heartfelt conversation she had with her brother Dustin, and I don't know, I just really, really loved this book. I loved the ending. I literally sobbed at the ending. All of that was just so beautiful. Eve and Shep's love confessions to each other was just beautiful, wonderful, amazing. This book is so beautiful, heartwarming, heartbreaking. I highly, highly recommend it. Obviously, if you don't like pregnancy-related romances, like surprise pregnancy or any of that, you may not love this, but I mean, it's literally on the first page, and the whole book is about her like journey, being pregnant, about to be a mom, accepting that, and accepting that her life is about to change. Obviously, if you don't enjoy those type of romances, then you probably won't like this, but if you are open to it, I highly recommend it because it was just fantastic. It reminded me a lot of Ashley Poston and a lot of Abby Jimenez's writing and storytelling, and it was just a perfect, perfect book. I loved it so much. So those are all the books that I read in May and June. I do have a DNF to quickly talk about, and that is Run Away With Me by Mila Gray. This is the 3rd book in the Come Back to Me series, and this was my TBR jar pick for May. And I did DNF it on page 143. Obviously, the point of my TBR jar is to finish the book and get it off my TBR. There are some cases where I will DNF a book if I'm just not enjoying it. That is what happened with this one. I just wasn't really enjoying the characters or the story. This is like kind of new adult, young adult. It's like in the middle. It deals with sexual assault and harassment, and I just honestly did not care about the characters. And so it was really hard for me to be invested in the story and to care about what happened to the characters when I just like didn't care about them. I just felt like I was reading the book to read the book, not to actually enjoy it or absorb anything from it. I was just trying to like get it off my TBR. And at that point I realized maybe I should just DNF it and not finish it. So that is what I did. I decided to DNF this, and I'm probably going to end up unhauling it just because I didn't really care about this book whatsoever. I also knew it was going to be like a 2-star read, so there was really no point in me finishing it. This was my TBR jar pick for May. Now you're probably wondering, did I read my June one? I didn't. My June pick was The Smell of Other People's Houses by Bonnie Sue Hitchcock. And I didn't even attempt to read that one. I just realized I wasn't interested in that book, so I decided not to read it. And I kind of decided like later on in the month, so there wasn't enough time for me to like pick up a new one and read something else. So I just decided to skip June. July, my pick is supposed to be Guilt by Catherine Longshore. I have decided not to read that one. I'm going to also unhaul that one. And I did pick a new pick in my Doing Bookish Stuff vlog. I will link that video down below. So for July, I will be reading Emergency Contact by Mary H. K. Choi, I think. So that one I will be reading for July. And then August, I'm still going to read In the Time of Serial Killers by Alicia Thompson, I think. I'm still interested in that one, so that one will stay as my August pick. Yeah, I didn't read May's pick or June's pick. I will read July's pick though in August, and then hopefully for the rest of the year I will continue to stay on track with my TBR jar. And I know it's no big deal, like obviously I'm still getting rid of these books, so they're not staying on my TBR shelf, but I wanted to try to read them, you know? Like I wanted to read the books that I have on there, but if I'm no longer interested, like I might as well just stop it and get rid of it. But hopefully the rest of the year will be smooth with my TBR jar. So those were all the books that I read in May and June. Let me know if you have read any of the books that I talked about and what you think about them, or let me know what books you read in the last 2 months. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to give this video a like, subscribe, follow me on all my other social media, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.